Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of our series, Shelf Space with Kino Lorber, where we talk about all things film, filmmaking, and physical media with Kino Lorber's head of acquisitions, Frank Tarzi. We also have a very special guest with us today, Jonathan Hertzberg, the man behind boutique label Fun City Editions. Welcome, Jonathan. Nice to see you, Frank, as always. And thank you to everyone joining us as viewers. As always, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions and share your thoughts. We'll be taking questions from the audience, from the chat about halfway through the episode, but feel free to submit your questions in the chat anytime. And we ask that you please stick with the topics of film and physical media. If you do have a customer service question, please submit them at the link in the video description below. We'll also put it in the chat. So hello, Frank and Jonathan. Why don't you guys start off by telling us how you know each other and what your relationship is within this physical media world?
Well, hi, Alicia and Frank. We know each other because I worked at Kino for about 8 years, working in theatrical sales here. But as Frank may or may not get into, it's a fairly small company, and so so I did have the opportunity to kind of. I guess butt in once in a while in the video side, and Frank and I would even though I wasn't working on the home video side officially, we ended up just talking a lot and having sharing our opinions, and sometimes he listened to me.
Well, when I left for 4 years, I don't to start all the films, the label. During that period, Jonathan was hired. So when I came back, that's when I met Jonathan. I think it was 2014.
Yeah.
So Jonathan always said he's very passionate about films. Has his own, special taste. But he's always, he always would recommend stuff to me. I remember one of the films he recommended to me was Cops and Robbers. And we got some nice a couple of interviews done for that, and that was a fun release for us.
Mm-hmm.
But I know there was other stuff. One of the biggest things that you brought to the company was the Wanderers, because you figured out that it was no longer Warner Brothers, and we went to Kaufman and everything else, and it was a very big success for us.
It still is, right?
Yeah, it still is. And there's also some nice theatrical. What was the name of the reggae themed movie?
That was Babylon.
Yeah, Babylon. That was another one that you're very passionate about. That did very well for us.
Yeah.
So Jonathan was always. It's kind of funny because if you look at the first batch of films that Jonathan released through Fun City, a lot of those were films that he had recommended to me, and I had kind of passed on for a reason here and there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I appreciate it, in hindsight,
Yeah, so. But you ended up picking up Married to the Mob, was something that I had originally released, and you did a new transfer, and so there's always there's a lot of films that we agree on. There's a lot of things that we agree on. There's other stuff that we don't agree on, and I think your label is a much more personalized type of a selection. So I think. These films that you've picked up, I think, work much better under your label than I would have done under a much larger banner of Kino Studio Classics. So.
Yeah, well, obviously, what I'm doing is on a much smaller scale than what you've got at KL. But yeah, I just to I guess go back a little more into what I did here. For a lot of the time I was here, I was curating a label called Kino Lorber Repertory, which was the theatrical, basically handling all of the theatrical releases of classic titles, reissues, restorations, and that kind of thing. So Frank and I would have some natural overlap there of something I worked on theatrically, like The Wanderers, for instance, was then going to be down the line a KL Studio Classic.
Yeah, and Rawhead Rex was another one that I acquired, and then you took over the theatrical, and there was other ones too. I know that you also re-released the Bava films. And,
right. The Bava films, the Roland films, the Wertmuller films. I mean, some of these were things you worked on, and some of our
I was involved in the Wertmuller acquisition. I was not involved in the Jacques Roland or the Bava series. Those were done when I was away for a little bit. Yeah, so I mean that's the great thing about these businesses that we have, that companies like yours and ours coexist, and sometimes, and very, there are films that we're both interested in that we both want to acquire, and that happens once in a while where we probably go on a maybe semi-bidding war, trying to get something.
I'm not getting in any bidding wars with you.
Well, I stepped away from one of the films that you really wanted because I knew you were very passionate about that. It was a film from Paramount. We're not going to say what it was, but I don't know if you've announced that yet or not. But
it's probably not yet. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good thing I didn't mention it. But I also asked you because Walt Olson really wanted me to release First Love. Mm-hmm. I asked you to kind of take a step back on that and let us get that so Walt could see it be released, but unfortunately he passed away before we could put it out. So
there's a lot more benefits to being friends and to being, even if we're at different companies, being more collaborative rather than competitive, and that's and so I'm in a nice position because I was here for so long, and I mean, and really, this might sound a little corny, but this is a lot of people probably don't realize how small. I mean, Kino, I think it's gotten a little bigger since I was here, but overall, it's not as big an operation I think as a lot of people imagine. So there's a family. I have a feeling of family with my former Kino colleagues, including Frank, and so it's nice because we're able to talk to each other and kind of. I can pick his brain, and he'll give me. He's got years and years of experience, more than most people in this business. So it's really nice to be able to ask him what he thinks about something or what he's done. Relationships with studios and stuff like that. There's a lot of peculiarities, things, quirks, and things like that he's had experience with already. And then with certain titles, sometimes I've told him things I was perhaps working on possibly, and kind of wanted to make sure I didn't want to be competing with Frank and vice versa. So.
Yeah, no, I love that. I feel like it gets reiterated again and again with every interview I read or watch and every conversation we have here, the camaraderie of this industry and the collaborative spirit. And it's not a cutthroat industry. The more collaborative it is, I feel like all boats rise. It's only like a win-win situation. So I really love that.
I feel like my attitude is I can never really get caught up with one movie or two movies or any. You kind of have to at times be more aware of the larger picture, and there's always other films to release. So if he gets something that I really like and wish I could work on, I mean, great. But there's going to be stuff that I'm going to be working on that he would have the same feelings about. But I'm happy that somebody's doing it. And I know if he's doing it, that it's going to be done well. So
right. And there was like I think you were interested at one point at No Way Out. The Kevin Costner.
Right.
Film. And why I told you I was planning to do that on 4K, you were like, oh, that's even better, because I don't think you were thinking about doing it on 4K. You probably were going to do it on Blu-ray. So there's always that kind of a thing that kind of happens, and then it's not like we're all like there's a kumbaya thing going on between all the labels. It's not.
No, it's not.
We're not like sitting around and calling Shout and Criterion every day and saying, hey. But there is relationships. I mean, I have a meeting with Shout this week, discussing trading extras and masters and stuff like that, because this thing happens so much, and the same thing I'm doing with Arrow right now, that we produce so much extras, and then our rights expire and they decide to re-release the film, and vice versa. We do their release their films. It's always nice to be able to just trade these for these extras and not pay new whatever you want to call it, advances and stuff like that. So, so we've done that. So we do have a good relationship with Shout Factory, but we don't regularly. I've done trades with you, Shout. That is the craziest thing. Like at one point, I remember Cliff is no longer a Shout. Cliff called me up and said, "Hey, I really want a film of yours." I was like, "Well, I'll let this one go, but you give me this." And he was like, "Okay, we'll do that." I used to do that a lot with Twilight Time when Nick Redman was alive. He passed away a few years ago. But I remember Nick and I would trade stuff. I had Gator, but I didn't have White Lightning, and I needed White Lightning, and he had it. So we discussed a trade that made sense for both of us. I gave him Under Fire, I remember. He gave me White Lightning. So, and yeah. But as far as you and I are concerned, it's not like we've done any trades. It's just we've kind of discussed stuff ahead of the actual deal and said, how maybe this is better suited for your label, and let's step back and
Right.
A little friendly strategizing.
Yeah.
Jonathan, tell us a little bit about Fun City Editions. What was your journey like in the industry leading up to it, and how did you get to where you are today with the label?
Sure. Well, so as I said, I was at Kino for 8 years, and prior to being here, my whole life I've always been obsessed with film and wanted to work in film, and I was also always a collector, and I collected films in all various formats, and so I was always interested in that publishing side of things, and as this business kind of moved into more and more sort of geared towards collectors and special editions and things like that. It was just something that I felt called to it. But at Kino, there was already a lot of good people. Obviously, Frank and several other people already. So there wasn't really a space for me here, and that just wasn't how I came up in the business. I happened to, like a lot of jobs in the film world. I got into film distribution not planning to be in it, and I got into theatrical sales and marketing and booking not really planning to be in that either. But it all served all that experience, even if it was kind of accidental or not planned, helped me get where I am now. And then the other part of it again was just my own passion and just building up this knowledge over time, and somehow finding a way to make sure that it's not just useless knowledge. And so I, like I said, there wasn't really a space for me to do that here, to really work on the video side, just because of where I was established and what was already established here in terms of our team. But I did have an opportunity to license some titles from MGM through another deal that another label, Vinegar Syndrome, was doing, and some friends of mine were putting that deal together, and so I had the opportunity to license a few films as part of that larger package, and that's kind of how the first 5 titles from Fun City Editions came out. And so, yeah.
Very cool. Well, I love the name Fun City Editions. I love that it's a nod to 1960s, 70s New York City. What does the name, say about the label? Is there something about the spirit of that era that really speaks to the type of films that you acquire?
Well, I just, I love, as I said before, we went on. I grew up outside of the city in New York, and kind of always was fascinated with the city and the history of it. And I was coming in from a very young age into the city, and I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and then also, of course, my film love, and I loved movies that were made in New York, and I loved how, as time passed, those films that were made, say, in the 60s and 70s, for instance, in the Fun City in the 80s, in the Fun City era, the way those films kind of took on like a documentary quality, in terms of, because the city changes so much and changes so fast. And so those films just become extra valuable because they're a document of the city at that particular time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it just was something that spoke to me, and I had done some work. I had done a video series earlier where I put together clips from different different films made in New York. It was called Dirty Old New York, aka Fun City, and it was just a project I did on my own on the side, but it's basically a compilation of footage of hundreds of different movies, and I sort of connected them based on locations and stuff like that, real locations in New York. So anyway, when it was coming to be time to name my company, I liked that Fun City was sort of this name that had kind of fallen out of fashion. You know, people didn't really know or call New York Fun City anymore, and so
Like
yeah, I just
expensive city.
yeah, yeah, Fun City, and then there was Fear City, which was like kind of like a response to Fun City, the name. But anyway, yeah. So that's yeah. It was those are things. It was just bringing together different things that I'm passionate about. But as far as informing the films, I could never make my whole like label. I could never make it all just like New York movies, Fun City movies. Sometimes people think that's what we do, and once in a while we have a movie that is a Fun City set movie like Born to Win or
Yeah, I was
Jeremy.
just gonna say Born to Win is so exemplary of like
Yeah,
that time period, like New York, just the old New York, like the really what I would romanticize, like that period of New York when it was dangerous, but it was just so much, it was like peak New York.
that is the most. That probably is the most Fun City movie in the Fun City collection. It's probably Born to Win.
Yeah.
So when I can do one of those movies, I love to do them. Like that's so it's funny that Frank mentioned Cops and Robbers because that's a great Fun City movie, and that was one of the ones that I suggested to him that he listened to me on. Although also was quick to tell me how poor the sales were over over the years. uh,
It was,
yeah.
but the thing is that it would be great if you could get all the New York films, but most of those films are very expensive.
Yeah, or they've been done. A
Yeah,
lot of
they've
them
been
been
done,
done
right?
already. So
Now, I remember watching films and living in Flushing in Queens. I was obsessed with seeing a movie that had the 7 train on it because usually most of the films that were shot in New York, they were shot in Manhattan, and a lot of times they even fake the subway stations. You could tell if it's like they're using like a subway station and just shot it.
yeah.
But I love, like, I remember when I watched Seven Ups and I saw the 7 Train, I was like, whoa, there it is, there's 7 Train. And I think, if I could be wrong, but the only other movie I could remember that 7 Train had a key moment on was the King of New York. The last sequence of the face off between Christopher Walken and all of them was shot on the 7 Train. So
Did you prep this going in, or did you just come
no,
up?
it just came to
This
me.
is
Yeah.
just coming off the top of
It
your
just came
head.
to me because I was thinking about how much we loved watching films that were shot in New York. It was like, to me, like the only other city that kind of has that is Chicago in some ways, where you watch certain scenes in a film, like you watch a Andrew Davis film, you're like, oh yeah, there's no doubt that's Chicago. You could tell, like, So, but New York is like special when it comes to cinema. It's like it's such a cinematic city, and especially during the 60s and 70s, it was much more cinematic.
Yeah.
I remember one of my little obsessions early on was, hey, why didn't I see the 7 Train in these movies? And I remember watching Seven Ups the first time. That was the one I remember when I noticed it. But we interviewed. I'm forgetting his name. The guy that directed 2 Days in the Valley and everything.
Is it John Hirschfeld?
Yeah, John Hirschfeld. John Hirschfeld. I'm sorry, John. So we interviewed him for Death Wish, and because he played the mugger on that
On the subway
on
train.
the subway train. He's
Yeah.
the one that pulls the knife on him.
He's in one of my videos, the
Yeah.
dirty old New York
Yeah,
subway.
and he said that they were trying to get some kind of like permission from the city to shoot that on this in New York, but on the subway, and they were not letting them, and they finally found a way to go. you know,
I think a lot of stuff.
pay some people off some bribes in here and that.
I think a lot of stuff that's shot in the subway is done guerrilla style.
Yeah.
Actually.
But this wasn't actually because it was such a big production. It was Dina De Laurentiis and all of that stuff, and
But yeah, but you know it is why you touched on it. Part of why I think I was always fascinated by the New York movies as well was just like what you said, because we were there, and there was something really special about seeing a spot, a location, or the train that you'd been on or been to, and there was something really special about that.
yeah, when I moved to 42nd Street in 2002. I would always watch for TV shows and movies to see if my building would show up, and actually, it showed up in one of the Bourne movies. And there was like a TV show called Castle. There's like a really big shot of that right under the truck where an ice cream truck was found when somebody's murdered and all that. But it was really great to actually see my building, and I was like, hey, this is actually New York. This is actually shot here. It's not Toronto. trying to be New York, you know.
It's a very
That,
nice feeling to recognize. Yeah. And
yeah,
it's
and that's the thing with old New York, because I'm older than Jonathan, so I remember the really Fear City part of New York where you know, you went to there was a period that between 42nd Street Grindhouse theaters to 52nd Street, there was probably around 40 to 50 movie theaters. I mean, you just cannot believe how many movie theaters there were. And I'm not, you know, you had the options were incredible, you know. So you would go and see, you know, if you wanted to see a nice double feature, you went to go to the Grindhouse theater. So I mean, a lot of times I would go the week after I see a movie that I really liked, like The Terminator. I saw it, I loved it. I was like, I want to go see it again. And I went to the Grindhouse theater to see what I was playing with. I was playing with Escape from New York, and I was like, wow, what a double feature this is. So
How much were they back then?
it was like $4, I think.
He remembers. He remembers. Like I could say, where did you see this movie in 1987? And he will remember.
Yeah, well, that was when I was obsessed with. I wanted to see every movie theater in New York, so I went to every movie theater. I did not miss a movie. I pretty much saw everything in theaters, even if it was bad. I got bad reviews. I was like, no, I'm gonna watch it. Give it a chance. And no, but that was the crazy thing about. There was all these. We had $1.50 theater in Queens that played double features for $1.50.
amazing.
It's incredible. It was like I
Oh,
remember still seeing Grease 2 and Paternity as double feature.
Which
that's
you've
interesting
put at
double
least
feature.
one of those movies out, right?
Yeah,
You,
but I wanted to put out both, but Paramount would not license Grease 2 to me.
you did get Paternity.
Yeah, I got Paternity first time ever
First time ever, right?
on DVD and Blu-ray.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Oh,
unfortunately, those with the rise of real estate in New York, none of those. Oh, you still got to go to a lot of those single screens, and we don't have like that. Doesn't exist in New York anymore.
yeah,
Which
the really
is a
cool
shame.
theaters like the Festival Theater. I remember the first time I ever went to the theaters to watch a film with subtitles in it because I grew up with Hollywood with mainstream films, and I remember going to I think it was the Festival Theater to see Akira Kurosawa's Ron, and I was just blown away by that film. I was like, oh my god, this is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And I was like, why am I not seeing films with subtitles? So after that, that opened the door for me to go out and start seeing. But there was theaters like that, which was that was I think on 57th Street, and then you had the 57th Street Playhouse, which is now the DGA Theater. You had all these really cool theaters. You had Manhattan, there was a repertory theater called the Biograph. It was on 57th Street. It was a double, and then it became Angelica 57th for a while. It was like, and that's where I discovered Buster Keaton. I remember that was way before I started working for Kino. I went. They had like a festival of silent films, back to back. You walked in at any time and walked out at any time, and that was at the Biograph Theater.
are we
Uh,
talking the 80s now, or what era are we specifically?
this was in the 80s, late 80s, mid 80s, and then because you know in early 80s I was very young, I wasn't allowed to go to Manhattan by myself. If I did, it was it was like without permission. But no, mid 80s to late 80s I started going. I used to always cut school on Fridays to go see movies. So so I remember I would go to the West Fourth Tower Records to buy 45s, and then I would have some breakfast. Then I would go to the Grindhouse to see double feature, and then go home and tell mom how great of a day I had.
Well, just out of curiosity, what is each of your favorite eras, for or decade for film
Mm.
or
You want to go
decades?
first? For me, it's from 67 to 76. It's not a decade. It's kind of unfair. But I think that's when filmmakers were allowed to make films. And I think it started in the late 60s and then ended in 76. I think as much as I love Jaws and Star Wars, I think they kind of killed that whole type of. I mean, films like Electric Glide and Blue and stuff like that would never be made in the 80s, but they got made in the 70s. I love it. I love all decades. But if I had to pick a 10-year period in music and film, it would be 67 to 76.
I love the specificity of that. I feel the same way about music. I think the best music was 77 to 96, and then it just all became crap after that. But anyway, I digress. Jonathan, what about you?
I would in some overlap with Frank. I really am interested in that period of the late '60s and the early '70s when the previous censorship standards, industry censorship standards, kind of were abolished, and the ratings code was established, and you also had, you know, all the '60s had happened, and the Vietnam War and civil rights and everything, and the way that the films at that time responded to those things that were happening in real life, and coupled with the fact that they now they could show more, they could do things they couldn't do before because the censorship had been, you know, the goalposts had been moved, and so you get a lot of really, it is that easy rider. I don't really like using the term easy riders, raging bulls, but you know, it's that time period of there was all this unrest, and there was and then like the industry kind of opened up a little bit, and it opened up to younger filmmakers as well. So that's why you had a lot of these, you know, these movies that you feel like couldn't have been made 5 years before and couldn't have been made 5 years later, because you know, the blockbusters came along.
Yeah, and also like company, you know, like United Artists had a lot to do with that also. I mean, they give filmmakers kind of carte blanche, let them do whatever they wanted. So then Arthur Krim, and you know, our old boss's uncle, he was you know, he was one that regularly gave filmmakers the freedom to do whatever they wanted, as long as they were stayed within budget and everything else. And you know, that was kind of what killed him eventually with, you know, with Heaven's Gate, because that's what happened when they gave Cimino all the freedom to spend as much as he wanted to make that movie, and that unfortunately bankrupted the company. But you know, but I'm just saying, you look at the '70s, you look at, you said films like, you watch like a movie like Bullet. That was the first film where you saw like real excessive violence, and like where somebody's getting shot with a Winchester.
Or Bonnie and Clyde.
Bonnie and Clyde. Those two films right there, they came late '60s, where they really pushed. Like that was the first time you really noticed. Like, oh, this is a different kind of violence. You don't see those in the film. And then of course Wild Bunch took it to a whole different level. You know, Peck and Paw. But yeah, those two films, Bonnie and Clyde, I remember, and Bullet. You know, I'm a bigger fan of Bullet, so that's why I said that first. But but the final shootout in of Bonnie and Clyde is legendary for how violent it was. But it was realistic. That's the thing that's one of the issues I have with films from the '40s and '30s and '50s. I love some of those films. Don't get me wrong, but you know, it's just, you know, guy getting shot 3 times and you don't see a bullet hole, or all the censorship stuff that got you know. But post pre-code, all that stuff is.
But that's why my other era would be the pre-code era, is another favorite era of mine, because it's before. It's sort of like it's the before to the later era that I just talked about, because the pre-code era was the era before the censorship code, the production code that was then in place, you know, until the late '60s. That was when it was. These are the films that came out before that, so you got a lot of. Maybe not the same level of sex and violence that you would have in the '60s and '70s movies, but you had more risque content in those pre-code films, and they were able to respond to stuff that was going on at the time, like the Depression and things like that, in a more realistic way, until you know, the censorship took over, and then that's when you had the next.
For people who are watching who don't know what the pre-code era is, can you specify when that was?
So it would be so basically like the late 20s, like basically the beginning of, I guess people usually think of it as the beginning of the talkie era, the beginning of talking films until mid 1934. 1934 is when the code started being enforced, and then so all the films after that had to, you know, really hew to very, very strict rules about, you know, certain things that were just completely off limits, and right, like you could never show, you couldn't show like a couple cohabiting unless they were married, and all sorts
Scandalous.
all sorts of stuff that was, but you saw it in the pre-code films, you know, you saw people having affairs and all this stuff, and then suddenly it was cut off for like the next several decades.
Yeah, there was a lot of suggestive scenes in those pre-code films, stuff that but they didn't show too much. It wasn't like, you know, there's some films that are kind of well known. I'm forgetting the name of it, even though I've released it. Called the Colbert, milk bath scene. That's in necessarily the mill film. That till this day you're like, oh my god, I can't believe it's actually a film from that era.
Or those like old surrealist movies like Louis Buñuel. Like there was a scene I remember with this girl filleting a toe, like a garden sculpture's toe. Like that was the 20s or 30s.
That's
Like,
different because in Europe they always kind of like,
What was made out? That was made outside the industry.
Yeah, that was made outside of the industry.
Gotcha.
Because if you look at the films from you look at a film like Bill du Jour from that was made in the '60s, that would never be made in the U.S. So
yeah.
The funny thing is that the whole thing with even married couples could not be in the same bed in the films from the '40s and '50s.
That's
and
right.
television
They
shows.
always have separate beds.
So you watch I Love Lucy or something like that, you see they have separate beds. You watch any films from the '50s. The first sitcom to show the married couple in the same bed was, do you know this or no?
Not right inside my head, no.
It was The Munsters.
Really?
Yeah.
So I never would have guessed that.
The Munsters were the first sitcom to actually show husband and wife in the same bed, and
That's very interesting.
it's kind of funny that they could even something like that was not allowed. It was really ridiculous when you think about it. But the only films that kind of got away with it a little bit was the B film noirs, the B crime movies. They would get away with some stuff that would they somehow push through under the envelope and not get it rated.
Well, they weren't being watched as closely.
Yeah.
Because they were B movies, like you said.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
do you have anything else, or did we completely use up our time talking about stuff that you did not plan on us talking
No,
about?
I love when the conversation just goes however it goes, and we're just about like halfway at the half-hour mark, and I still have a lot of questions left, but I do want to get to the audience questions shortly, but just a few more.
I'll try to be succinct.
Oh, no worries. I mean, I think it's a great sign when the conversation just goes and takes its own, has its own life. But I read in another interview, Jonathan, that you referred to your work as almost being like a custodian for the films that you reissue. Guillermo del Toro actually said something very similar, but about physical media collectors. How do you both feel about that level of responsibility, as both distributors and collectors, that you're a custodian for these films?
Well, I feel like in my position, it just feels like the right way to describe things. Like for a little while, if I license a film and it's a limited license, and for a little while it's in my hands, and I'm responsible for, I feel it's a privilege. I'm privileged to be able to put it back out there and to give it context and give it that package that I think it deserves, and do right by it, and do right by the filmmakers and the people who made it. And then as far as like with collectors, we have a lot of stories about a lot of things being saved because of collectors. A lot of films or materials, elements, things that could be from a major studio film, and the studio doesn't have it, but thankfully because of obsessive collectors over the years, some of those things, or a lot of those things, were saved by fans, by collectors. So
Yeah, they're not just consumers, they're archivists in a lot of ways.
yeah, and also I feel like these things are meant to kind of go through different hands, and that happens. People pass on, and then their collections get broken up and come in and it goes into other hands, or it goes into a museum. These I think these things, they don't necessarily belong to us forever, but it's a good thing. It is a good thing that there were people that over the years that have had that level of devotion and obsession to have saved some of these things, which we otherwise wouldn't have now.
And you mentioned packaging. Speaking of packaging, I've noticed that a lot of Fun City Editions releases have newly commissioned artwork. This is a question for both of you guys. How important is packaging when it comes to physical media, both from a distributor standpoint and as a collector?
Well, I feel like we're a lot of times we're reintroducing films, sometimes films that are pretty obscure, and we're reintroducing them to the market and to the audience, and sometimes introducing them for the first time, even though we're working on older films. And I think it's important to to preserve the original artwork, but it's also an opportunity to kind of rebrand these films and remarket them. And sometimes, a lot of the films I work on, for instance, are kind of difficult movies to market. So they didn't always have the best marketing, say, when they first came out, because they were difficult. They just didn't have an easy sell. And anyway, I just think it's something that we're putting something out there that's for collectors, and it's something so it's not disposable, and people do like to have, you can see behind us, people like to have this stuff up on their shelves, and so it's a whole object. It's not just the movie, and so it's important for me, and I know people appreciate seeing high quality new artwork. Just a different way to present the film. But we always give people the option. If they want to flip it around and show the original artwork, they can do that too.
We do less newly commissioned art. We've done it before. We've done it for a lot of the TV movies because they don't have posters, and so it makes sense to do those for them. But then you have a film, like you said, you didn't know how to, even a hit movie, you watch a poster, you look at the poster for The Longest Yard. It's like Burt Reynolds flipping his jacket over his shoulder with his hairy chest with a mustache, and he only has the mustache in the beginning of the film. He plays it. It's a football movie, but they didn't know how to promote it, so it became a huge hit because Burt Reynolds was a big star. But if you look, that poster is almost unusable. You cannot do anything with that. So that's why we had to go and create new art for that. And we've done it in the past. We've done it for some films. Some of the movies that we acquired from Disney, the original posters were not great, especially the Hollywood Pictures and Touchstone stuff. And so we ended up doing new posters for titles like Deep Rising, and then we did it for Puppet Master and stuff like that. And so I feel that we've done it, but a lot less. Most of the time, if there's a good movie poster, either a great U.S. movie poster or a foreign one, we end up using those. And most of our reversible arts are like the alternate posters from different countries and stuff like that. So, in some cases, we have one poster on the old card, one on the wrap, one on the reverse. That's when there's a lot of really good posters available for the same movie. But yeah, they're companies like his and Arrow and all of them, they commission new art for almost every release. Even if the original poster is a masterpiece like Escape from New York or whatever, they still do a new poster. I know Shout used to always do it, but they kind of not doing it as much as they used to. The fans usually, I'll be honest with you, most of the time love the original posters if it's a good one. If it's not a good one, then they usually are okay with us commissioning new art.
But if one person's good posters, another person's crappy, you should never please everyone.
No, you can never please anyone.
Well, that's why you have two options.
But even if there were some fans that told us, why didn't you use the original Longest Yard poster as a reverse? I was like, because it's a piece of shit. I'm not gonna. It's not even that additional.
He's not gonna sugarcoat it, folks.
I'm not gonna put that on a disc. It just doesn't look. It doesn't make any sense. It's full of text. I don't know if you remember the poster, but it's just
I can picture it. Yeah.
They give you a synopsis of the movie on the poster, so it's just like it was ridiculous.
Anything else? Or are we getting to customer questions or?
Last part is the lightning round. So we have some signature shelf space questions that we ask all of our guests. So this is like a lightning round, so it can be quick or it's up to you, honestly. Let's start with, what are your top 3 favorite films of all time and why?
Well, I've already talked about it.
This is for Jonathan.
Oh, it's for me. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wait, top how many?
Top 3. Or if you want to just do 1, that's fine, or 2.
Those are always tough questions. Those are always tough, but groupings are good. Two Lane Blacktop is a movie that's for me, it fits into that category I was talking about before, that early 70s anything goes era. That's a favorite of mine. It just came up today. I was talking about favorite Fun City movies, and An Unmarried Woman is one of my favorites. Again, it's these things, we cycle through these things all the time. But yeah, those are a couple. The Swimmer, the Frank Perry movie with Burt Lancaster, one of Frank's favorites. Burt, the other Burt. That's a formative movie for me as well. But yeah, I never like getting tied down to favorite or lists are lists are not my thing. But I know for you it's the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, Good, Bad, and the Ugly is one of my favorites without a doubt. But I would never put it as my one movie.
Yeah.
I know Tarantino does that, but there's so many movies I love. For me, even doing a top 100 in alphabetical order would be tough. That would be tough. I mean,
Yeah.
I would have to spend hours on it, and so doing coming up with a top three. No, I mean it's films that I watch a lot. I kind of started believing that if I'm watching a movie a lot and regularly watching it, like Where Eagles Dare or something like that, it's probably one of my favorite movies of all time. So, I mean, Jonathan's movies are all really good choices. I like all those films, but none of them would make my list, But I mean, from the three, the one I probably like the most is probably Tulane Blacktop. I really like The Swimmer. I think it's really impressive film, but not not something. And I like that, and Married Woman too. I think it's a very good movie. I just, for me, I'm more of a genre fan, and I think he loves realistic dramas and stuff like that a lot more. So
I might have to change
I could have put some genre. There could have been some genre ones there if you got me on a different day.
next time. I'm gonna ask just name three movies that come at the top of your head. The first three movies that come to you that you love. Because it's just too hard to choose
It's
like your
tough. It's a
favorite, right?
hard.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's really tough.
impossible question. Okay, whose opinion do you trust implicitly on movie recommendations? And is it maybe the person sitting next to you?
no, it's the question to you.
Oh, again, it's all for me.
Yes, this is a lightning round for our guests.
Oh gosh, who's it? Oh man, wait, ask that again. Who,
Whose
Whose
opinion?
recommendations?
who's
Whose opinion do you trust the most, or just implicitly when it comes to movie recommendations?
Uh, hmm. um, I'm gonna, I don't know. I gotta pass on that one. Is that okay?
And I can tell you why he passes on that because I think just like me, I think our own tastes are like so. Even when people I used to work in a video store, people say, "Hey, can you recommend something to me?" I was like, "What do you like? Tell me that for." Because I could recommend Clockwork Orange to you, and you could go home and just be shocked. So
I think I guess maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but is that sort of like, is there a critic or someone that you really is it that kind of thing, like somebody?
Well, you could
No, it can be someone, like in your personal life. It can be your older brother, or it could be, like the person who got you into collecting. I don't know. It doesn't. It's
Sure,
like,
sure. Well, I'm going to shout out. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to shout out a good friend of mine who also is in this same business, and you might know him. But David Marriott, who's a good friend of mine, who is a very good friend of mine, who runs or co-runs the CIP label, Canadian International Pictures, and Arbalos. So he's got two labels, although he also has partners in each. But David's just a really good, somebody that we tend to agree on a lot of films, or just kind of have similar sensibilities, I guess. So yeah, David, if you're watching right now, love you, buddy, and maybe you'll be a guest on here.
Well, the thing is also, I know his taste. So if there's a movie that I see that I'm like, oh man, I think Jonathan would really like that, I could tell him that. And vice versa. He's come to me and said, have you ever seen this movie? I'm like, no. Oh, you have to watch it. I think you'll love this. Because knowing each other's taste also is like a big part of it. Like I know I remember Brian, we went to see a movie, Brian Sherry, who works for us. He would once in a while see a movie that he thought I would love because he knows what type of movies I really go for. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, that was a great recommendation. Sometimes I'm like, no. And I would give him reasons why I didn't like it as much as he thought I would like it.
I can bet that you would do that.
Yeah.
I think I probably witnessed that
Yes. Yeah, well, it's to me, it's like when somebody tells me to read their screenplay, I'm gonna be honest. So I'm not gonna tell them, "Oh, this is really good." No, I'm gonna tell them why it's so bad. So
He's going to tell you why he doesn't use the longest yard theatrical poster,
because it's a piece of shit.
and he'll tell you if your screenplay is as well.
Yeah.
I love honesty. Okay, one more question before we get to audience questions.
Good.
Why is physical media more important than ever, and why should people start collecting?
Well, It's been said a lot already. There's been a lot of ink spilled. I mean, movies are streaming, and then they're not. They're ephemeral. This on the streaming platforms, and so there's some truth to the idea that the physical is forever. So, yeah, I think it's important if you want to be able to access your favorite film whenever you want to access it, and if you might have it you might have it saved on your DVR or something, or on a streaming platform, and then it might it could get pulled and it won't be there anymore. But our Blu-rays will or 4K UHDs will live on your shelf for as long as you want them.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, the Blu-ray is the one that has the audio commentary by John Frankenheimer. I mean, Frankenheimer died years ago.
Yeah.
But if you bought the Train from us, or you buy any of most of his films that he did commentaries for, you have an audio commentary by a legendary filmmaker. In some cases you have interviews by legendary people.
Right.
We have one of the last interviews for any of his features that Burt Reynolds did was for us when he did White Lightning and Gator, and I'm so proud of having that as an extra. So it's not just actually watching the movie. You're watching the movie, that's great, but you're going to see this incredible interview by him talking about the making of the movie.
So it's more than an extra in a way.
Oh, it is.
Right?
It is. Because
if you say something's an extra, it's almost you're cheapening it.
No, of course. I think that
you've released mini those are little documentaries on.
Yeah, like we did for Taking Up a Home 1, 2, 3. We interviewed Hector Elizondo, David Shire. The editor. And their experience of making the film during the 70s, it's like it's like a time capsule. They take you back to that period where they made that film and how things were different.
Yeah, the other thing I will add is I think that what we have the opportunity to do with these physical editions of the films is to present the film, but then also, as he just put it, present the stories around it, historicize it and contextualize it, and we can do that with interviews and audio commentaries and all that stuff that is much harder or much doesn't exist in the streaming world.
Right. John Llewellyn Moxey was legendary TV. He was a British director, made British films, came to America and made TV movies, and some of the classic TV movies of the 60s, including The Night Stalker. And we got to interview him when he was 94 years old.
Oh yeah, that was great.
Like a year before he passed away, and we got interviewed him for like 6 movies, and because I had acquired all these TV movies that he had made, and then you ended up Scott Wilson, one of the greatest character actors of all time. We interviewed him like a few months before he passed. Mitchell Ryan was another one that we interviewed like a few weeks before. Wow. And sometimes we do have the final interview of like a great star or legendary character actor,
and that's probably something that isn't reported on in that way or positioned that way, that what these interviews are, and especially like you said, with people that are getting on in years or actually passing away. And you've released so many movies that you probably have hundreds of instances.
Yeah,
of that.
it's more than I really, because it's very sad also, because you just interviewed somebody and they agreed to it, and then like 3 weeks later you find out they passed away, and like it's very, very sad. But it's incredible. It's a great thing to have. It's like these are like time capsules of
They're pieces of history. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's get into the audience questions. Zachary Friesel-Lieben is asking, how far along in the process do you decide whether or not to release the title in 4K? It's frustrating when a Blu-ray proclaims remastered in 4K, but there's no 4K release.
Well, the 4K market, I'm going to speak about that because I've released a lot more 4K. The 4K market is a very complicated market. It's changed. When we started, we were only going to take chances on really big films. The first title we released was Hannibal because it was a sequel to a classic movie. It was directed by Ridley Scott, had a great cast, and it had huge box office. So I felt we could take a chance to put it on. And then we ended up picking up some really big movies like Mad Max and Silence of the Lambs and Good, Bad, and the Ugly and all those kind of things. When we pick up a movie now, like let's say The Train, we picked up The Train, released it. We didn't do a new restoration. We just released the previous extra, previous master. I'm sorry. And then it did very well for us. I knew also that it had been previously released by Twilight Time twice, so I knew that it had done very, very well for us, so we decided to give it a chance and put it out on 4K. In some cases, like Missing in Action, I just felt that they were not big enough films to put out on 4K, so we did new 4K scans, new HD transfers, we put them out, and then fans are like, well, a year later you're going to put it out on 4K. And we've never done that. In most cases, it's been 2 to 3 years later, and it's usually after the film has proven itself on Blu-ray. When the film proves itself and shows that there's enough of a market for it, it gives me more confidence to put it out on 4K.
Well, the other thing is that in most cases, those 4K UHD rights are treated as a separate format, and it's a much more expensive license from the studios.
And mastering is more expensive, authoring is more expensive,
color grading, everything.
Color grading, everything is more expensive.
It's a totally different process.
So it's a different process, and then I am taking more chances now. Like releasing films like Sneakers and Sea of Love on 4K, I would have never done that 5 years ago, 4 years ago. But now I'm saying
you're reckless.
Now I'm reckless. Watch out.
So it's not just like, oh, I decided not to, or it's just an arbitrary thing. There's a whole listing. There's all this that goes into it. So for anyone that's watching, like, this is a great education into that process.
Yeah, we're not out there to screw the consumer. We're not doing this saying, oh my God, we're gonna get them to buy the Blu-ray first, and then we're gonna put it. No, that's never the decision. If a film is strong enough to be put out on 4K, we usually go out and release it on 4K. Like Rampage, we just picked it up. We put it out on 4K on Blu-ray because the horror film is freaking. We feel like we have confidence it's going to do well on 4K. But if I'm going to pick up Gung Ho, which is a good little Ron Howard film with Michael Keaton and stuff, I don't have the confidence to put that out on 4K. It's going to be first time coming out on Blu-ray. I'm going to put it on Blu-ray. If it comes out of the gate selling like, if the sales are gung ho, then we are gonna, like 2 years later, probably put it on 4K. That's what's gonna happen. I picked up Career Opportunities. I never thought that film was a 4K release. It's a John Hughes film. It's Jennifer Connelly. It's a surprisingly huge selling title for us on Blu-ray. So now I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go and pick up the 4K rights. It's 2 to 3 years after. But we never put it out originally on Blu-ray thinking, oh, we're going to put it on 4K 4 years later, or 2 years later. We just didn't know at that point.
Lisa Camarillo is asking, hi, I think this one is for Jonathan. Will we get more Fun City Edition movies in the theater, or is this collab with Alamo a one-time thing?
Oh, well, we'll definitely have, every film license is different. Sometimes we have theatrical rights, sometimes we don't. But when we do, for sure, we've put our films in theaters before this as well. What she's referring to is a series that Alamo Drafthouse is doing in various locations, and they're highlighting Fun City Editions, and they're showing 5 of our titles. But yeah, I would say for sure, if the opportunity is there, we will release our titles, theatrically. It's not obviously it's not the thing we do every time. Our main platform is the video.
Yeah, the studio films you don't have.
The studio films, we don't get those rights for the most part. Yeah. So.
Gotcha. I love Alamo. That sounds like a great collab.
Yeah, I'm really excited, and we've been talking about it for a while.
Has it not? Is it a thing in the past, or has it not happened yet?
Hasn't happened yet. It's starting at the end of this month. So
cool.
Yeah. So, but it's been like something we've been talking about for a while. So, yeah.
You want to make a small announcement, like which Alamo locations and which titles?
Well, I can tell you the titles, but I don't know all the theaters, and some of them are showing some of the movies, and some of them are showing all of the movies. But the titles that are included are Neige, the French film with Juliette Bertheau, directed by Juliette Bertheau, Deep in the Heart, the Tony Garnett film, also known as Handgun, and Radio On, British film by Chris Pettit, and now I'm on the spot. Heavenly Bodies is in there, Heavenly Bodies is one of our upcoming titles, and we just did a new restoration of that, so that's going to be in the series. And I think I'm forgetting one right now. Sorry.
Paradise?
No, it's not Paradise. But if you go to if you just Google Fun City Editions in Alamo Drafthouse, there's a page. It will come up and tell you.
Awesome. Scaps is asking, "Hi Frank, thanks for releasing Cowboys and Aliens. What was the reason for uncut version not getting 4K treatment?" This is a similar question to the previous one.
Well,
Frank's favorite question.
the theatrical cut, we could not do HDR or Dolby Vision because once we put this is a movie that was shot on 2K. It was a DI master. There's no actual camera negative that we could go back to and to scan. And so a lot of these films, including some major movies like the Bourne Identity films, all of those are DI masters. So it was it was an up-res of a DI to 4K, and when we did it when we tried to do an HDR, it failed. There was a lot of artifacts and stuff that showed up, that like the weird things in the sky and all that kind of stuff, because it was all because of special effects. We dropped Dolby Vision first, then we dropped HDR, and then we said, let's see how it's going to look on SDR, and it looked fine on SDR. And that was because there was a D1 master for that one. For the other cat, they didn't even have a D1 master, so all they had was an HD master, and so the option was, do we up-res the HD master to 4K? And then we're like, no, we're not going to do that. It's just going to be too. So that's the reason we did that. It's a release that we almost dropped because we were like so frustrated that it took us so long to actually figure out a way to release it. But I think it's gonna look very good. It's the longer cut, the director's cut. It's not called the director's cut. It's called the extended cut because the director himself has never called it his cut. I think the film itself, the version that we released, is going to be on the 4K disc, is the preferred Jon Favreau cut. So that's the reason. It didn't make sense for us to do it. We didn't actually. If we had D1 masters for both cuts, we would have put both versions on 4K, but both would have been SDR. So.
Got it. JP has a question. Is there any chance that Kino Lorber will be releasing more of the classic ABC Movie of the Week titles in the future?
I would love to, but unfortunately at this point Disney has kind of shut their vaults, and if it was available for me, I mean, I would have, if the option was there for us, we would have renewed The Night Stalker, Night Strangler, we would have renewed Trilogy of Terror, we would have renewed
Nightmare in Badham County.
Not that one. We would have renewed Duel of the Sun and a lot of other films. Probably done new restorations and retransfers of a lot of the films. But right now, that option is not available to us. So yeah, I would love to release it. The same thing with NBC. NBC has a lot of, Universal has a lot of really good TV movies, but a lot of those films are not cleared musically, or for some reason, they just don't have the needed paperwork. So if they don't have the paperwork, they're gonna call it as not available, pretty much. Because if they don't want to release something, and then it's one thing for them to take the chance and put it out, but if we have one of their licensors put it out, and then a lawsuit or something comes up, they don't want to deal with that. So
Zero risk.
There've been situations where we've picked up some stuff. I'm not going to say which films to quit claim, which is pretty much, they said, you guys want to take a chance and put it out, go ahead and put it out. And we've done a couple of those.
Gotcha. We have a few more questions. Mihia is asking, what are the titles that were difficult to release, parentheses, like studio wrangling, music or IP rights, element issues, market appeal, etc., that you are most proud of putting out, even if they weren't strong sellers?
I'll go. One of my favorite ones that checks a lot of those boxes that I released through MGM is Heartbreakers, a film by Bobby Roth from 1984, which was one of those films that we were told no on, and probably because they had to find the legal department in the studio. The legal department kind of dictates whether a lot of this stuff happens or not, and they kind of have to assess the risk, basically. Like if they don't have, if they're missing some paperwork, or they're having a hard time finding something that could be music related and other things. So that was one that I was very happy, because that had never come out since the VHS, the video cassette era. Another one like that is I Start Counting, which was our second release, British film with a very young Jenny Agutter that, you know, had a lot of fans, and it was actually one of the movies that I tried to have happen here at Kino, and it was one of the things that was really driving force for me to do it myself, and it, you know, was really well received, and similar thing where the studio told us no multiple times, and but we were able to, get to push it through.
I mean, we probably have a lot of those, especially the quit claim type of titles. But one that I could remember was Get Crazy. Get Crazy was one that we that was forever told. We were forever told that's not going to be available. There's a lot of issues and stuff like that. The director got involved, and everybody, and we did a really nice special edition, and it's done. Has it done as well as I wanted? I was hoping it would, Noah, but I was very proud of that release. We did very well.
People that are into that movie love that.
Yeah,
movie.
they love that film. Yeah, it's kind of a cult classic. And then there's the other thing is a lot. There are times where you actually have one studio saying this studio owns it. Mm-hmm. And this other studio says, no, that studio owns it. Mm-hmm. So we have a situation with a film where I've gone to two different companies. They both don't want to touch it. They both think the other company owns it. So then what are you going to do there? You just got to, it's not going to get released because both companies don't have they think it ended up with the other company and it hasn't. So, mm-hmm. But that's like one film that I could think of. I'm not going to say what it is because but
we're going to talk about it after the cameras are off.
All right, couple more questions. Paladin Productions is asking, hey, love the pre-code talkies from earlier. That's one of my favorite eras. This one's probably more for Frank, but I'm curious if any hints could be given for future pre-codes from Kino Lorber Studio Classics. Thanks again.
I guess we always confirm a title. We have a double feature of two pre-code titles from very early 1930s, starring Sylvia Sidney. So you guys can figure out what those two films are, but there it is. There's two movies. So, and it's going to be released as a double feature. It's going to be the Sylvia Sidney pre-code, whatever. I don't know. You can come up with a title for it.
All right, we'll work on that also after.
All right, I think this might be our last question, unless we get a few more trickling in. Mark Patel is saying, hi, Frank and Jonathan. First off, thanks for all that you guys do. You both have killed it with Paramount. Jonathan, do you have more Paramount discs for Fun City? Any other studios?
We do have more Paramount titles coming, and we'll be announcing another one soon. Not ready to do it yet, but by the end of the year, we'll have another. We do have several others from Paramount that we're very excited about, and some things that are largely never on Blu-ray before, at least. So I think people will be excited, but more to come.
Very cool.
No other studios though, right? I don't think right now. Anyway, yeah, Paramount. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also a difference between Jonathan and I love announcing stuff and confirming it really early. He waits until the last second. Everything is ready, then he's like, okay, I'm gonna announce.
When it's ready to go up for sale, yeah. Most of the time, yeah, that's what we like to do.
Yeah, we do weekend announcements of coming soon, which some fans love, some hate because sometimes a year later it's still not out yet. But so overall, that
you always have something else to tide them over.
And then there's also surprise announcements, stuff that we hadn't confirmed that just come out all of a sudden. So there's always
on their toes. Gives them something to look forward to.
We have so many movies. I think if Jonathan had as many movies to release as I have, I think he would be doing the same thing. He would be announcing stuff.
I just can't imagine doing as many movies as you do. So salute you.
Well, that's a perfect segue into, do you guys have any other special announcements or anything else you'd like to announce before we wrap up?
No, that's it. If people really want to know what the name of the two titles are, we'll put it on Blu-ray.com or somewhere like that. So we'll announce it. But I think they could probably guess it. It's not going to be that difficult. So.
Yeah, I'll just say we should have two more. We should have two more titles to announce before the end of this year. So.
Oh,
But
I'm very
Nothing
excited.
more specific than that. Sorry.
Well, everyone just have to, you'll have to stay tuned and keep, uh, yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Jonathan, thank you for coming on as a special guest, and thank you both
Thanks.
for the wonderful chat. Yeah,
Thank
and
you
check
for
back,
having me. Thanks for inviting me.
of
It's,
course.
it's an honor to be on here.
I feel like there's so much more to talk about, so I don't know, maybe you'll be our first repeat guest. We'll see.
I mean, my commute is pretty short,
yeah,
so
well,
you know.
he's a New Yorker, so he'll be the
That's
emergency
perfect.
guest host. So and so didn't show up. But I could also say that in a couple of months we're gonna have legendary cult filmmaker Bill Lustig as a guest. So that will be, I think, in November. That's what we're planning to
Uncle
do.
Bill.
Uncle Bill is gonna be in town. We're gonna have our steak at Frankie and Johnny's, and then we're gonna come over here and do the do the show together. So he, of course, besides being a really good filmmaker, he has his own label, Blue Underground, and so he's. I think that's something I'm really looking forward to. For next month, I'm trying to get somebody, but at this point, we're not sure. So,
Okay, well, that just means
So I
everyone
could be
has
the
to check
repeat
back.
guest next month, is what you're saying.
We'd love to
we'll
have
take
you,
a break.
Jonathan. Just wanted to mention that you can find the titles that we discussed today, along with thousands of others, at kinolorber.com or klstudioclassics.com. Both of those links are in the description below. And while you're there, sign up for our newsletter if you haven't already. And of course, be sure to follow us on social. And thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Hey, one other thing, just you want to give your website?
Oh, yes,
Yes.
please do.
Yes, funcityeditions.com. That's our website. And then
Okay.
we're on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook as well. So,
That's great.
Awesome.
Okay,
Thank you guys so
thanks.
much. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone, for
thank you.
watching.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.